The story I'm about to convey is almost unbelievable. It's hard for me to believe, and I was right there. This story is so amazing that I cry just about every time I tell it. There are times when I'm so blessed by it, it's crazy, and then there's other times that it goes the opposite way. I just wonder what happened. So please hear my heart as I tell this story. Be encouraged as you hear this amazing tale. My wife and I had decided to take a break and go relax a little bit, and my brother had just moved to New Braunfels, Texas, and so we went to that area to camp, pulled our little camper down there. We were going to see the sights, and I think I was extra ready to go because we, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, had been in the midst of a very rain-filled month, and you know how that is when you can't go outside. The rain had finally ended, and there were these blue skies, and our plan was to get a spot, sort of near town, but to be in a state park, out from the lights and the noise. So we'd been working nonstop for months, and I needed a break so bad, and we're almost giddy as we set up the camper, and we headed out to find a new adventure. We had decided that we would rent a couple of tubes and just float the day away. So as we went to all the different places, they were closed, and the levels of the rivers were too high due to all that recent rain. But we found one tube rental open, and we stopped in. Now, normally the rivers are completely chocked full of floating tubers, but not today. The owner was sitting there so bored, no one was renting because everyone thought that all the rentals were closed. And so we rented our tubes and our life jackets, and we headed to the car for our cooler, and our sunblock and our sunglasses. And I remember almost running to the river. I was so ready to float and unwind in the cool spring water. So we sprayed our sunblock on, we tied our cooler onto one of the tubes we had rented. We put on our sunglasses and off we went. And I remember as we floated along, we were trying to remember the instructions of the tube rental guy. He told us, now ahead of you are 3 waterfalls. And when he told us as we get to the first fall, I couldn't remember, go to the right. You get to the second fall, go to the left. So it was about the time we're floating along, just nobody on the river but us, when I screamed out at Brenda. I said, "Oh my gosh, babe, we forgot our life jackets." Now at this point we were way too far down the river to go back, and so the idea was just to play it as safe as possible, and as we got to each of the falls to just make it easy. But the problem was we couldn't remember which side of each of the falls was the safe side. We were on the river alone, and the power of this water was just unbelievable. Neither one of us are good swimmers, and here we are without life jackets, and we're floating along. And as we came to the first falls, I remember the panic in both of our voices. Which side? Which side? And the hope that our choice would to go right at that fall was correct. Now, since that, they've changed the falls, and because they had so many rescuers having to go down and save people, and the place to go at the first falls was actually to the left, and now they have a tube line that takes you over to like a little slough that you slide down. But that day we went to the right, and the falls were raging. My tube and I, with the cooler in tow, went over first. And I got to tell y'all, the turmoil turmoil of the fall was so strong, I knew we had chosen the wrong side. The fall slammed me against the rocks and crashed my head into a very hard, smooth rock. It hurt so bad. And then milliseconds after that, the cooler crashed down on top of me, smashed me to the bottom again. But the interesting thing was I was kicked out to the right, further to the right, in sort of an eddy that was just absolutely powerfully swirling around me. And as I stood there rubbing my head and clinging to the two tubes in about chest deep water, or maybe even a little higher, closer to my neck, I turned and I saw the most horrifying sight of my life. My wife had plummeted over this raging area, and I saw nothing but her tube. It was boiling and flipping at the base of this mighty fall, and I yelled out her name, and then I saw it. One arm reaching for her tube that was just out of reach. My thought was, as I pushed against the flow, that there's no way I'm going to get there in time to push her tube over to her flailing arm. And I got to be honest with you, I began to scream and cry, "Please, Lord Jesus, please, I don't want to watch my wife drown today." Folks, I could not believe this was happening, and I pushed so hard, pressing against the power of the water and yelling out, "God, please save my wife." And I got to tell you, my heart sunk in my chest because I was making very little headway against the current. My thoughts were consumed at that moment with the thoughts of what was going to happen ahead of us here as the rescuers dragged my wife's lifeless body out of the river. I screamed again, "Please, God, I don't want this. Please help her." I yelled with my head. I put my head down. I didn't want to watch what was in front of me, to be honest, and I screamed as I pushed forward as fast as I could. I would lift my head for quick glances, but this time, when I looked up, there was something different. And please forgive my lousy depiction of it here, but there was a young man standing in the falls. And he was close to my wife. He was like tall and healthy looking. He was a very tanned young man. And he was standing there looking straight at me. And the water seemed to have no effect. It kind of split around him as he stood there. And I noticed in my peripheral vision that there was a carbon copy of him standing on the other side of the falls at the other end as well. And I got to tell you, at this point, I didn't ask any questions or even wonder where he came from. I just saw a moment that might save my wife from certain doom. And so I said to the young man, "Hey, can you push my wife's tube over to her, please?" Kind of yelled it out at him, and he said, "Yes, sir." And he did exactly that. My wife's flailing arm that was sticking up, she was stuck there in the power of this swirl that was beneath this raging fall. But her flailing arm just kind of found the tube and wrapped itself over the top. But the problem was that the underflow and the currents were just far too strong for her to pull herself loose with her one arm, and that it had a grasp on her so strong, and she just couldn't make it to the surface. And I could tell it wasn't working as she tugged and tugged. So I said to the young man, he's just standing there looking at me. I said, "Hey, buddy, can you pull on that tube and pull her loose from the water flow?" He said, "Yes, sir." And he did exactly as I asked. And I got to tell you, what followed was one of the happiest moments of my life. As I continued pushing towards my wife, she popped up loose from the waterfall's grasp and got above water. She was spitting up water and water running out of her nose, and she grabbed her first breath and she was coughing and choking. But she was above this raging torrent. I got to tell you, we were shaken, to say the least. But I was so happy to be above water. I was so happy that she was above water and we were out of imminent danger. And what we had just experienced was so bizarre. I don't think I'll ever feel the immense amount of relief and joy that I felt as I saw her face and watched her breathe her first breath as I pushed towards her. Now, what was interesting is these two young men began to see to and meet our every need. They helped us over to the side and walked us down where the water was more calm, and they helped us get reseated in our tubes and then safely floating down the river. And the funny thing, though, in this powerful, raging torrent, they were swimming, no life jackets, and in this powerful water, they were swimming circles around us, pretty good sized circles around us. You know, swimming downstream with us was no problem, and across, not too bad, but back upstream on the other side. So I started asking stupid questions. I was in shock, I think, and I said, so you guys on your swim team at school? Because they were so powerful. And they said, no. And I said, are you guys out here often? And each time, I'm sorry, they would say, no, sir. Are you guys on the swim team? No, sir. Are you guys out here often? No, sir. And I was amazed. Do you live around here? And again, I was met with just two words, just no, sir. So now we're approaching the next set of falls after a time of questioning and my wife and I talking about what had taken place. And these amazing swimmers helped us get over to the other side this time for the second set of falls. They were taking such good care of my wife. It was amazing. And making sure she was safely in her tube. And they got us around the fall, back in the tube. And I for the first time, they spoke to us without us initiating anything. And they said, sir, there's one more fall ahead. And after that, you both are going to be fine. And I was so appreciative and so overwhelmed with emotion, I wasn't even thinking clearly. And all I could do was ask simple questions, and they were always met with no, sir, and yes, sir, as we floated. After we followed their instructions, we got past the third set of falls. They helped us get seated again, and the young guy spoke again. And he said, sir, right up here, we're going to be leaving you, and we're going to go back home. And he told me of a sign that hung over the river that would direct me to the left side so that we could get to our exit point where we'd be picked up by the tube rental guy. And about halfway to the sign, they directed us over to the side there of the river to say goodbye. I got to tell you, my wife and I both, we were overwhelmed with emotions, and we hugged them both as they left us. And these two young men walked over the hill of that riverbank and out of our lives right there. I was sitting there just looking at our stuff, making sure everything was together. And as they cleared the top of the hill, I thought, wait, we should get their addresses, their phone numbers. Because I just had to tell their parents about the amazing young men that they had raised. So I told my wife, get ready for this last leg of our journey. I'll be right back. And I assumed, as I cleared the top of the hill, that I would be, met with a parking lot and our two young helpers getting in their car. But I got to tell you, what I saw is even more amazing than what I've told you thus far. I saw nothing but a field, pretty good sized field, bigger than a football field, and a distant tree line. And at first I was confused at what I saw. Where could they have gone? I said, and I stood there for a moment, and then I went back to my wife at the river. She said, "Did you get their names?" And I just stood there. I said, "No, ma'am." My wife said, "Their addresses, phone numbers?" I said, "No, ma'am." Stunned, I just stood there and I said, "Babe, they were gone." She said, "What do you mean they were gone?" She said, what? Come on. And we both went back to the top of the hill together, and we marveled at the distance. And it was a distance that they couldn't have possibly ran in the short period of time to get out of sight. And as we stood there, I said, "You know what? I know their names." And she said, "Oh, you do?" I said, "Yes, ma'am. Angel 1 and Angel 2. Now look, we stood there with tears in our eyes. We could barely believe what had happened. In the next few hours, we ran through the story over and over and over. We were absolutely amazed at how each moment went and how we each saw the moment. Brenda wanted to hear about what it was like when she was not above water, and she told me what it was like to be there, and we just were so extremely blessed, crying and hugging. And now, later that evening, my wife had been saying to herself a number of times, "Wow, this is the weekend that I almost drowned." She said the Lord's still small voice down deep inside her said, "My daughter, you can frame this weekend however you want." She said, that's what the Lord told her. You can say that this is the weekend I almost drowned, or you can frame it a different way and say, this is the weekend the Lord saved my life. He told her, you can put this in either frame. Tell folks about it either way you choose. So after receiving this word, this revelation, she shared it with me. And of course, I now give it to you, and I give the Lord all the credit. Now later in the midst of all this, as I studied one day, a message came from the Lord in the same way, and it was two scriptures. Psalms 91, 11 and 12. For he shall give his angels charge over you, to keep you in all your ways. Verse 12. In their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. And the second scripture he gave me was Hebrews 1, 14. Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation? Now I got to tell you that this was not the last time that the Lord would save our lives. As you listen to this story, there's a similar story here on this YouTube page of mine. But I want you to know that we're not special. You're no different. If you're a child of God, He's watching over you. And He has charged His angels to keep you and serve you. So be at peace today. And can I say this in honor of my wife? How will you frame the day? God bless you. You're special. See you soon. Bye-bye.